The proposal Vikram Malhotra drummed his fingers against the polished mahogany of his desk, scanning the dossier one final time. The woman in the photograph possessed a quiet kind of beauty. Nothing flashy, just elegant features framed by dark hair that fell in soft waves. Anya Sharma, age 28, art teacher at Sunshine Valley School. No immediate family, no romantic entanglements, perfect. She'll do, he announced, closing the file with a decisive snap. His assistant, Rohan, shifted uncomfortably. Sir, are you certain? There are several other candidates with better social connections that might... I said she'll do. Vikram's tone left no room for discussion. Arrange a meeting for tomorrow evening. At 36, Vikram had built Malhotra Industries from nothing into one of India's most formidable conglomerates. His next move, expanding into the Middle Eastern market, required partnering with the conservative Al-Farsi family, who had made it painfully clear they preferred dealing with family men. A bachelor was considered unpredictable, unreliable. After years of dismissing marriage as an unnecessary complication, Vikram now found himself requiring a wife, quickly and with minimal disruption to his life. The following evening, Anya Sharma sat across from him in his penthouse, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple salwar kameez in deep blue that complemented her olive skin. Her eyes, alert and intelligent, betrayed no nervousness. I appreciate you meeting me on such short notice, Ms. Sharma, Vikram began, studying her carefully. I assume my assistant explained the basics of my proposal. He mentioned a business arrangement involving marriage, she replied, her voice soft but steady. Though I admit I'm still confused about why you would choose me. You fit specific criteria. You're educated, presentable, and discreet. You have no family complications that might create entanglements. He paused. Most importantly, you need money. A flicker of something, pride perhaps, crossed her face before disappearing. I manage fine on my salary. Your apartment building is scheduled for demolition next month. Your school is cutting arts funding, and your medical bills from last year's hospitalization remain largely unpaid. He stated these facts without emotion. I've done my research, Ms. Sharma. Anya's composure wavered only slightly. You're very thorough. I don't waste time. Here's my offer. Marriage for 3 years. You'll have an allowance, a new home, and I'll clear your debts. In return, you'll attend business functions as my wife, maintain appropriate appearances, and sign a prenuptial agreement waiving claims to my business assets. After 3 years, we divorce amicably, and you receive a settlement of 5 crore rupees. The sum, approximately $600,000 USD, hung in the air between them. For a woman living paycheck to paycheck, it represented freedom, security. And what about, she hesitated, physical expectations? There are none, Vikram answered flatly. This is strictly business. Separate bedrooms. We present as a couple publicly, nothing more. Anya looked down at her hands, then out at the Mumbai skyline visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city glittered with possibilities that had always remained just beyond her reach. Why me? Truly, she asked again. There must be women from your social circle who would jump at this opportunity. Vikram stood, walking to the window. Those women come with ambitious families, social agendas, and emotional expectations. You're unattached, clean, simple. He turned back to her. The contract is on the table. Take it home. Review it with a lawyer if you wish. I need your answer within 48 hours. Anya picked up the thick document, weighing more than just its physical heft. And if I say yes, what happens then? We marry quietly next week. You move in here. We begin our arrangement. Later that night, Anya sat cross-legged on her threadbare sofa in her tiny apartment, the contract spread before her. The leaky faucet in her kitchen ticked a steady rhythm, a countdown to decision. Her phone buzzed with a message from the hospital's billing department. Another payment reminder. She thought of her students, their faces lighting up when she brought out the paints and clay, the way art gave them a voice. The school's budget cuts would eliminate her position within months. Then what? Anya had survived on her own since aging out of the foster care system at 18. No parents to fall back on, no siblings to lean on, just her own determination and occasional kindness from strangers. She'd built a life of sorts, but it remained fragile, always one crisis away from collapse. She picked up a framed photograph, the closest thing she had to family, showing herself with a group of children from last year's art exhibition. This was what mattered to her. With Vikram's money, perhaps she could open her own art school someday. Never again worry about funding cuts or administrative whims. As dawn broke over Mumbai, Anya made her decision. Marriage had never been part of her plans. Who would there be to walk her down the aisle anyway? But perhaps this business arrangement could be the foundation for something she'd never dared dream of. True security, a future built on solid ground rather than shifting sand. 2 days later, she sat in Vikram's office, sliding the signed contract across his desk. "I accept your terms, Mr. Malhotra." Something that might have been relief crossed his face. "Good. My lawyer will handle the preparations. And Anya," he used her first name for the first time, "from now on you should call me Vikram. We are, after all, about to become family." The word family echoed strangely in the vast office, a concept as foreign to both of them as the arrangement they'd just formalized. A marriage built not on love or even attraction, but on mutual need and cold calculation. Neither could have imagined how that would change. Paper hearts. The wedding was precisely what Vikram had specified. Efficient, private, and without sentiment. A civil ceremony on a Tuesday morning, attended only by his executive assistant Rohan and Anya's colleague Prisha as witnesses. No family on either side, no celebration afterward. Just signatures on documents and a gold band that felt unnaturally heavy on Anya's finger. "Congratulations, Mrs. Malhotra," the registrar said warmly, clearly expecting the customary kiss. Vikram merely nodded, placing a perfunctory hand at the small of Anya's back as they exited the building. Cameras flashed as they emerged. Business reporters tipped off about the sudden marriage of one of India's most eligible bachelors. Vikram's mouth curved into what photographers would capture as a smile, though Anya felt the stiffness in his posture. "Just 5 minutes of this," he murmured. "Then it's done." They posed briefly, Vikram's arm around her waist, her body angled toward his in practiced intimacy that felt like the most elaborate lie she'd ever told. Yet something about the weight of his hand against her back, steady, certain, gave her a strange sense of security she hadn't anticipated. Their new home was Vikram's penthouse, redesigned to accommodate her presence. Her wing, as he called it, included a bedroom suite, a small studio space for her artwork, and a sitting room. His occupied the opposite end of the residence, with the shared spaces, kitchen, dining room, main living area, functioning as neutral territory. "Dinner is at 7, he informed her that first evening, not looking up from his laptop. "We should eat together at least 5 nights a week. It's what normal couples do." "Is that in the contract too?" Anya asked, immediately regretting the edge in her voice. Vikram glanced up, his expression unreadable. "No, but appearances matter even at home. The staff will talk, the staff, a housekeeper, a cook, and a driver, had been briefed about the new Mrs. Malhotra, but Anya could feel their curious gazes following her as she moved through spaces that didn't feel like hers. Everything in the penthouse was sleek, expensive, and utterly impersonal, like a luxury hotel rather than a home. That first week passed in awkward choreography as they learned to navigate around each other. Vikram worked punishing hours, often leaving before Anya woke and returning late. When they did share space, conversation remained minimal, practical. She learned his habits: black coffee in the morning, no sugar, the financial news playing while he reviewed reports, the way he unconsciously straightened objects that weren't perfectly aligned. He never asked about her day. On Friday evening, Vikram informed her they would be attending a business dinner the following night, her first public appearance as his wife. A car delivered several designer outfits for her to choose from, along with a jewelry box containing pieces worth more than everything she had ever owned combined. "Wear the blue one," he suggested when she showed him the options. "And the sapphire set." At the dinner, Anya performed her role flawlessly. She smiled at the right moments, made appropriate conversation with the wives of Vikram's associates, and maintained the perfect balance of attentiveness and independence. She could feel Vikram's approval in the slight relaxation of his shoulders as the evening progressed. "You did well tonight," he acknowledged on the drive home, his attention still on his phone. The Al-Farsi representative was impressed. "With me or with your ability to acquire a suitable wife on demand?" Anya asked, watching Mumbai's lights blur past the car window. Vikram looked up, studying her for a moment. "Both, I imagine." 2 weeks into their arrangement, Anya realized something disturbing. She was lonely in a way she had never been before. Previously, solitude had been her natural state. A quiet apartment, meals eaten alone, decisions made independently. Now, surrounded by luxury and staff eager to serve her every need, she felt the absence of genuine connection more acutely than ever. She threw herself into establishing a routine. Mornings were spent in her studio, afternoons volunteering at a community arts program for underprivileged children. She declined the driver, preferring to take autos or the metro, clinging to fragments of her previous independence. One evening, Vikram returned earlier than usual to find her setting the dining table herself, dismissing the housekeeper's offers of assistance. "Is something wrong with the staff?" he asked, loosening his tie. "No, Anya arranged the napkins with unnecessary precision. "I'm not used to being waited on. It makes me uncomfortable." Vikram considered this as he poured himself a drink. "You'll adjust." "I don't want to adjust," she replied quietly. "Not to everything." That night, unable to sleep, Anya wandered into the living room to find Vikram still working, surrounded by documents and a half-empty glass of whiskey. "You work too much," she observed, curling up in an armchair across from him. "That's how empires are built," he answered without looking up. "Why are you awake?" "New place, new life. It's still strange." She pulled her knees to her chest, looking more vulnerable than he'd seen her before. "Do you ever feel lonely, Vikram?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He set down his pen, considering her with narrowed eyes. "I'm too busy to be lonely." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." He returned to his work, effectively ending the conversation. The following weekend, they attended a Diwali celebration at the home of Vikram's business partner, Ajay Kapoor. Unlike their previous formal engagements, this was a family affair. Children running through the decorated house, elderly relatives dozing in corners, the comfortable chaos of a real home. Anya found herself seated beside Ajay's mother, a warm, silver-haired woman who immediately took Anya's hand in hers. "So this is the bride who finally captured our Vikram," she said with a knowing smile. "He was like another son to me, you know. Always working, that boy, never taking time for joy." "He's very dedicated," Anya replied diplomatically. "And what about your family, Beta? Your parents must be so proud." The question struck like a physical blow. Anya's practiced smile faltered. I don't have family." The older woman's eyes softened with genuine compassion. "Everyone has someone, child." "Not everyone," Anya whispered, her composure slipping momentarily. Across the room, Vikram was watching. Something in Anya's expression, a flash of raw pain quickly suppressed, caught his attention. He observed as she recovered, smiling and changing the subject, but the moment lingered in his mind. Later, as children gathered to light sparklers in the garden, Anya stood apart, watching with an expression Vikram couldn't decipher. He joined her, offering a glass of champagne. "You're quiet tonight," he observed. "It's a beautiful celebration," she said, not quite answering. "The Kapoors are lucky to have such a large family." Before Vikram could respond, Ajay's 5-year-old daughter approached, tugging at Anya's sari. "Auntie, will you help me with my sparkler? Mama says I need a grown-up." Without hesitation, Anya knelt to the child's level, her face transforming with a genuine warmth Vikram had never seen before. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's be careful together." He watched as Anya guided the little girl's hand, their faces illuminated by golden sparks, the child's delighted laughter mingling with Anya's gentle instructions. There was an ease to her movements, a natural grace in how she interacted with the child that contrasted sharply with the measured restraint she typically displayed around him. On the drive home, Anya gazed out the window, lost in thought. "You're good with children," Vikram noted, breaking the silence. A small smile touched her lips. "Art teacher, remember? Children are my favorite people. They're honest about what they feel. Unlike adults? Unlike most adults I've known," she agreed, turning to look at him directly. "Present company included," Vikram frowned. "I've been honest about my expectations. Honest, yes, but not open." Anya twisted her wedding ring, a gesture he'd noticed she made when uncomfortable. "We live in the same space, we share a name, but I know nothing about you beyond what's reported in business magazines." That was the arrangement. "I know." She sighed, turning back to the window. Sometimes I just wonder if it's possible to live this way for 3 years without becoming real people to each other. The question hung between them unanswered, as Mumbai's lights reflected against the window glass like distant stars. Beautiful, cold, and impossibly far away. That night, Vikram found himself standing in the hallway outside Anya's bedroom, hand raised to knock, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Through the door, he heard a sound that stopped him, soft, muffled crying. He lowered his hand, retreating silently to his own room, troubled by an unfamiliar feeling that took him hours to identify. It was guilt, not an emotion that typically troubled Vikram Malhotra. The realization that perhaps in solving his own problem, he had entangled someone else in an arrangement more complex than either had anticipated. The thought followed him into uneasy dreams, where sparklers burned down to nothing and paper hearts crumbled at his touch. Fractured foundations. The first real crack in their carefully constructed facade appeared exactly 2 months after their wedding. Vikram returned from a business trip to Singapore to find the penthouse unnaturally quiet. No sign of Anya in her studio, her bedroom, or any of her usual places. Frowning, he questioned the housekeeper, who hesitated before responding. "Madam left early this morning, sir. She seemed upset. She took nothing with her." Vikram checked his phone. No messages. Their arrangement included a basic courtesy of informing each other about schedule changes and absences. This silent disappearance was out of character for the consistently reliable Anya. Did she say where she was going? The housekeeper shook her head. "No, sir," but she hesitated again. "Today's newspaper is on her desk." She circled something. In Anya's studio, Vikram found the newspaper with a red circle around a small article. Sunshine Valley School closure announced. Budget cuts claim another arts program. He remembered vaguely that this was where Anya had taught before their marriage, a detail he'd noted and dismissed as irrelevant to their arrangement. After several unanswered calls to her phone, an unfamiliar sense of concern prompted Vikram to do something he'd never done before. He left work early to look for his wife. The school was his first stop. A modest building in a middle-class neighborhood, now eerily quiet with a closed for reorganization sign on the gate. A security guard directed him to a nearby park where many of the teachers had gathered with students and parents in what appeared to be an impromptu farewell. He spotted Anya sitting on a bench, surrounded by children. She was reading from a picture book, her voice animated as small faces watched her with rapt attention. Even from a distance, Vikram could see the redness around her eyes. Though her smile for the children never faltered, Vikram waited, observing this version of Anya he'd never seen, passionate, expressive, completely present with these children who clearly adored her. When the story ended and the group dispersed, he approached. "Your phone is off," he said, sitting beside her. Anya startled slightly. "Vikram, what are you doing here?" "Looking for my wife who disappeared without a word," he replied, an edge in his voice. "That wasn't our agreement." She looked away. "I'm sorry. I just needed to be here today." A small girl approached before he could respond, clutching a crayon drawing. "Teacher Anya, I made this for you to remember me." Anya's composure cracked as she accepted the gift. "Oh, Tanvi, it's beautiful. And I could never forget you." The child threw her arms around Anya's neck. "Will you still teach us art somewhere?" "I'm trying to figure that out, sweetheart," Anya whispered, her voice breaking slightly. After the child ran back to her mother, Vikram studied the drawing, a colorful depiction of Anya surrounded by smiling children, all holding paintbrushes. "These children mean a lot to you," he observed. Anya nodded, carefully folding the drawing. "Most of them have nowhere else for art in their lives. Their parents work long hours, schools focus on test scores, and creativity becomes a luxury." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "Art was what saved me as a child. I just wanted to offer the same to them." Something in her expression made Vikram uncomfortably aware of how little he knew about the woman he'd married. "Saved you from what?" The directness of his question seemed to surprise her. She was silent for so long that he thought she wouldn't answer. "From disappearing," she finally said, her voice so quiet he had to lean closer. "From becoming just another forgotten child in the system." Understanding dawned slowly. "The system? You mean foster care?" Anya nodded, her gaze fixed on the distance where her students were leaving with their parents. 14 different homes between the ages of 3 and 18. Never in one place long enough to really belong. The information hit Vikram with unexpected force. He'd known she had no family. That had been a criterion in his selection process, but he'd never considered what that actually meant in lived experience. Your file didn't mention foster care. A bitter smile touched her lips. No, it wouldn't. I've become quite skilled at crafting a biography that doesn't invite pity or uncomfortable questions. She turned to face him directly. Isn't that what you wanted? Someone presentable without messy family entanglements? The accusation in her tone was justified, and for once, Vikram had no ready answer. That evening, they sat in the penthouse living room, the city lights forming a glittering backdrop to a conversation neither had planned. Anya, emotionally exhausted, found herself revealing details she'd never shared with anyone. My earliest memory is being taken from my third foster home in the middle of the night, because the father had been hitting the other children. I was 4. She cradled a cup of tea that had long gone cold. I remember being told to be quick, quiet, not to cry because it would wake the baby. Vikram listened silently, his usual impatience notably absent. The best home was when I was 12. The Patels. They had books everywhere and let me paint on one wall of my bedroom. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I thought maybe they'd keep me. But then Mr. Patel got transferred to America, and their visa wouldn't cover a foster child. So I went back into the system. And after you aged out, no one kept in touch? Anya shook her head. That's not how it works, Vikram. You're a file that gets closed. A responsibility that ends. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. A temporary person. The phrase hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that seemed to reach beyond her childhood and into their current arrangement. Is that why you agreed to our marriage? Because temporary is what you know? The question was more insightful than Anya had expected from him. Perhaps, or maybe I thought a relationship with clearly defined boundaries and an end date was safer than risking something real that could still end badly. The honesty of her answer created a strange intimacy neither had anticipated. Vikram found himself sharing things he hadn't planned to, about growing up with parents who measured love in achievements, about building a business to prove his worth, about how marriage had always seemed like an unnecessary complication until it became a business necessity. So we're both damaged goods, Anya concluded with a tired laugh. I prefer to think of it as having realistic expectations, Vikram replied, though his usual conviction was missing. The following morning brought an unusual scene. Vikram, normally gone before dawn, was sitting at the kitchen island when Anya emerged. A stack of papers sat in front of him. I have a proposal, he said without preamble. The community center near your old school has space. With proper funding, it could be converted into an arts program for those children. Anya stared at him, confusion evident. What are you saying? I'm saying that Malhotra Foundation could fund such a program, with you as its director. He slid the papers toward her. Preliminary plans, budgets, timelines. If that's something you'd want. The gesture was so unexpected that Anya found herself speechless. Vikram Malhotra, the man who calculated every move for maximum return, offering something that benefited only her and children he'd never met. Why would you do this? She finally asked. Vikram seemed uncomfortable with the question. It makes practical sense. You need occupation, the children need a teacher, and my foundation needs community projects for tax purposes. But Anya saw something in his expression that contradicted his business-like explanation, a hint of genuine concern that he was trying to disguise as pragmatism. Thank you, she said simply, unwilling to challenge his need to frame generosity as strategy. Over the next few weeks, as plans for the Art Center progressed, subtle shifts occurred in their relationship. Conversations extended beyond practical matters. Dinners lingered past the necessary appearances for staff. Vikram began asking questions about her day, showing interest in the children's artwork she brought home. One evening, he arrived at the penthouse to find Anya asleep on the sofa. Surrounded by grant applications for the Art Center, a sketchbook had fallen to the floor beside her. Picking it up, Vikram found himself looking at a detailed drawing of a young girl, perhaps 8 or 9, sitting alone on a bench with a small suitcase. The loneliness captured in the image was palpable, and with sudden clarity, he realized he was looking at Anya's childhood memory. As he carefully returned the sketchbook, Anya stirred, blinking up at him. Sorry, she murmured, sitting up. I must have dozed off. You're working too hard, he observed, echoing her own words to him weeks earlier. A small smile touched her lips at the callback. That's how dreams are built, isn't it? Their eyes held for a moment longer than usual, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them that perhaps they were beginning to see each other as more than the roles they'd agreed to play. The grand opening of the Malhotra Community Arts Center coincided with their 4-month anniversary. Watching Anya cut the ribbon, surrounded by cheering children and grateful parents, Vikram felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Pride he identified, but not the calculated satisfaction of a business achievement. This was something warmer, more personal. Later that evening, as they walked through the empty center after everyone had left, Anya stopped in front of a wall where children had painted their handprints in rainbow colors. This is the first permanent thing I've ever been part of, she admitted softly, something that won't disappear when I do. Vikram studied her profile in the dim light, struck by the realization that their contract marriage, designed to be temporary, had given Anya something she'd sought her entire life. A chance to build something lasting. Sometimes the most important foundations are invisible, he said, thinking of how his own understanding of success had begun to shift since knowing her. Anya turned to him, genuine curiosity in her expression. When did Vikram Malhotra become philosophical? He didn't have an answer that wouldn't reveal too much, about how her story had seeped into his thoughts, about how the fractured pieces of her past made her strength in the present all the more remarkable, about how he'd begun to question whether some broken things might be worth repairing rather than replacing. Instead, he simply offered his hand, a gesture without precedent between them. After a moment's hesitation, Anya took it, her fingers warm against his palm as they walked back to the car together, in companionable silence. That night, for the first time since their arrangement began, Vikram stood outside Anya's door not because of obligation or concern, but because he simply wanted to wish her good night. The door was slightly ajar and he could hear her on the phone. I know it's not real, Prisha, she was saying softly, but sometimes I forget it's just business, and that scares me more than anything. Vikram withdrew silently, those words following him into dreams where foundations cracked but didn't crumble, where broken things found new ways to be whole. Unwritten rules. 6 months into their arrangement, the unspoken boundaries between Vikram and Anya had begun to blur. The strictly separate lives they'd initially maintained now overlapped in unexpected ways. Vikram found himself leaving work earlier, curious about Anya's day at the Arts Center. Anya began asking intelligent questions about his business ventures, offering perspectives he hadn't considered. Their contract remained unchanged on paper, but the spirit of their interaction had evolved beyond its clinical terms. Neither acknowledged this shift directly. It existed in the margins, in unwritten amendments to their agreement. One rainy Sunday afternoon found them both at home, a rare occurrence. Vikram was reviewing quarterly reports while Anya organized materials for the coming week's classes. The steady drumming of monsoon rain created a cocoon of intimacy around the penthouse. What did you want to be when you grew up? Anya asked suddenly, looking up from her work. Before business became your focus? Vikram glanced at her, surprised by the personal question. Why do you ask? Just curious, she shrugged. 6 months of marriage and I still don't know the basic things most people learn on first dates. He set down his tablet, considering the question seriously. An architect, really? Anya's genuine interest encouraged him to continue. I was fascinated by the idea of creating spaces that could shape how people live, work, interact. He gestured to the city visible through rain-streaked windows. Mumbai is a living museum of architectural styles, colonial Art Deco, modern glass towers. I wanted to add to that landscape. What changed? My father died when I was 19. The family business was failing. Architecture became a luxury we couldn't afford. Vikram's tone was matter-of-fact, but Anya detected the remnants of an old disappointment. I took over, rebuilt, expanded. The rest is history. Do you regret it? Regret is inefficient, he replied automatically, then caught himself. But sometimes I still sketch buildings that will never exist. This confession, small but significant from a man who rarely revealed vulnerability, shifted something in the atmosphere between them. May I see them sometime? Anya asked softly. Vikram found himself nodding before he could analyze why sharing something so personal suddenly seemed possible. That evening, he brought out a leather portfolio he hadn't opened in years. Together on the living room sofa, closer than their usual careful distance, they paged through his designs, ambitious structures that blended functionality with unexpected beauty. "These are extraordinary," Anya said, fingers hovering over a particularly innovative concept. "You had real talent." "Have," he corrected with uncharacteristic playfulness. "I'm not dead yet," she laughed, the sound warming the space between them. "Sorry, have, definitely have." The moment stretched, comfortable in a way neither had anticipated when they'd signed their marriage contract. Later, Vikram would identify this rainy Sunday as the first time he'd thought of their penthouse as a home, rather than a residence. The following week brought an invitation that tested their evolving dynamic. Vikram's mother, Sudha Malhotra, a formidable woman who had relocated to Delhi after her husband's death, announced an unexpected visit to Mumbai. "She rarely leaves Delhi," Vikram explained tensely. "This is about you." Anya felt a flutter of anxiety. "She wants to meet the woman her son married without consultation?" "Precisely." He pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture Anya had come to recognize as stress. "She'll stay for 3 days. We'll need to be convincing. More convincing than we've been for your business associates. My mother is considerably more perceptive than any business associate," Vikram replied grimly. Sudha Malhotra arrived like a carefully controlled storm. Elegant, impeccably dressed with eyes that missed nothing, her assessment of Anya was immediate and thorough, from her simple salwar kameez to her unadorned wrists. "So," she said after abbreviated pleasantries, "this is the bride who didn't require my approval." "Mother," Vikram warned, "Anya is my wife." "That should be sufficient, should it?" Sudha's perfectly arched eyebrow conveyed volumes. A son who never expressed interest in marriage suddenly weds a woman with no family, no connections, and a modest teaching background. "Forgive my curiosity." Anya, who had prepared for coldness but not this direct challenge, felt her spine straighten. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Malhotra. I appeared in your son's life without warning or introduction. In your position, I would have questions too." The straightforward response seemed to catch Sudha off guard. She studied Anya with renewed interest. "Indeed, and perhaps over dinner you'll provide some answers." Dinner proved to be an elegant interrogation. Sudha inquired about Anya's background, education, and aspirations with the precision of a prosecutor. To Vikram's surprise, Anya answered with calm dignity, neither apologizing for her humble beginnings nor fabricating impressive details. "And your parents?" Sudha eventually asked, reaching the question Vikram had hoped to avoid. "I never knew them," Anya replied simply. "I was raised in the foster system." "I see." Sudha's expression revealed nothing. "And did no family ever adopt you permanently?" "No, I aged out of the system at 18. "That must have been difficult." Anya met the older woman's gaze directly. "It was, but it taught me self-reliance and resilience. I'm not ashamed of my background, Mrs. Malhotra." A moment of silence followed this declaration. Then unexpectedly, Sudha nodded. "Nor should you be. Adversity reveals character more clearly than privilege ever could." Later that evening, as Anya prepared for bed, a knock at her door revealed Sudha rather than Vikram. "May I speak with you privately?" the older woman asked. In Anya's sitting room, Sudha came directly to the point. "My son has built walls around himself since his father died. Business became his refuge, his identity. I've watched him succeed brilliantly and become increasingly isolated." Her sharp eyes assessed Anya. "Until you." "I'm not sure what you mean," Anya replied carefully. "He leaves work before 8 now. His assistant mentioned he actually took a weekend off last month. Small changes but significant." Sudha leaned forward. "I came to Mumbai expecting to find a convenient arrangement. Instead, I see something else developing. The question is whether you recognize it too." Anya felt suddenly transparent under the older woman's perceptive gaze. "Our marriage has evolved beyond our initial expectations." "Marriage often does," Sudha observed with the hint of a smile. "Even ones that begin as business arrangements." The following morning, Vikram found Anya and his mother in the kitchen, preparing breakfast together and conversing easily. The sight was so unexpected that he paused in the doorway, struck by how natural they looked. as if this were a normal family scene rather than part of their carefully constructed illusion. "Vikram," his mother greeted him. "Your wife has been telling me about her art center. Why haven't you taken me to see it?" "I didn't think you'd be interested," he admitted. "A Malhotra Foundation project? Of course I'm interested." She handed him a cup of coffee prepared exactly as he liked it, a detail she must have learned from Anya. "We'll visit today." At the art center, Vikram watched with astonishment as his typically reserved mother sat on the floor with children, participated in a painting activity, and engaged enthusiastically with Anya's teaching methods. The genuine warmth between the two women, the only family connections in his life, affected him more deeply than he had anticipated. "She's remarkable," Sudha commented as they drove home. Anya having stayed behind to complete some work. "Not at all what I expected when Rohan first called me about your sudden marriage." Vikram nearly swerved the car. "Rohan called you?" "Of course he did. He's been loyal to this family for 20 years. Sudha adjusted her sari calmly. "He was concerned you were making a business decision about a personal matter." "It was both," Vikram admitted. "And now?" His mother's question hung in the air between them. Vikram didn't answer, but his silence was revealing enough. On her final evening in Mumbai, Sudha presented Anya with a small velvet box. Inside lay a delicate gold Mangal Sutra with a single diamond pendant. "This was mine," Sudha explained. "Given to me by my mother-in-law when I married into the Malhotra family. Now it belongs to you." Anya stared at the traditional necklace, a symbol of marriage, far more meaningful than the functional gold band Vikram had placed on her finger at their civil ceremony. "I can't accept this," she whispered, aware of the irony in refusing a family heirloom when she had longed for family connections her entire life. "Our marriage isn't what?" Sudha challenged gently. "Traditional? Neither was mine. Arranged marriages seldom begin with love, Anya. They begin with purpose, duty, practical considerations. Love is what grows afterward if you're fortunate." She closed Anya's fingers around the box. "I see how you look at my son when you think no one is watching. And more tellingly, I see how he looks at you." After Sudha's departure, a new awareness lingered between Vikram and Anya, an acknowledgement that their performance as a married couple had become increasingly genuine. Neither seemed ready to address this directly, but their interactions carried a different quality, charged with unspoken possibilities. One evening, returning from a particularly successful business dinner, they stood in the penthouse elevator in comfortable silence. Anya wore the Mangal Sutra Sudha had given her, the diamond catching light with each breath. "You were extraordinary tonight," Vikram said suddenly. "The Rodriguez account, we secured it largely because of you." Anya smiled, pleased by his recognition. "We make a good team." "We do." He hesitated, then added, "Better than I anticipated when I proposed this arrangement." The elevator doors opened to their penthouse, but neither moved immediately. They stood at the threshold of their shared space, both aware that something fundamental had shifted. "Vikram," Anya began carefully, "when we started this, there were clear boundaries, separate lives under one roof. Yes, those boundaries have changed." "Yes," he agreed again, more quietly. "I need to know." She took a deep breath. "Is this still just business for you?" The question demanded a level of emotional honesty that had never been part of their contract. Vikram found himself at a rare loss for words. The practiced responses and calculated statements that served him in business utterly inadequate for the truth forming in his heart. Before he could answer, his phone rang, Rohan with an urgent situation requiring immediate attention. The moment fractured, the question lingered unanswered, and the familiar pattern of business taking precedence reasserted itself. Later that night, unable to sleep, Vikram stood on the penthouse balcony. Mumbai spread before him like a constellation of earthbound stars. He thought about Anya's question and the answer he hadn't given, about how his carefully ordered life had been quietly rearranged around her presence, about how the 3-year timeline specified in their contract now seemed both too short and increasingly irrelevant. In his office, he unlocked a drawer and removed their marriage contract, reading through the clinical terms that had once seemed so logical, so efficient. The document now felt strangely hollow, a framework that failed to capture the reality that had developed within it. On an impulse uncharacteristic of his usually methodical nature, Vikram took a pen and drew a line through the contract's end date. In the margin, he wrote a single word, indefinite. It was a question rather than a statement. The first time in years that Vikram Malhotra had allowed himself to face a future he couldn't fully plan or control. He returned the contract to the drawer without sharing this amendment with Anya, uncertain whether he was ready for her answer or his own. Some rules he was beginning to understand couldn't be written down. They had to be discovered, tested and chosen not once but every day, in the small moments and silent choices that gradually constructed something true from what had begun as pretense. The richest kind of love on the morning of their one-year anniversary, Anya woke to find a small blue box on her bedside table. Inside was a key and a note in Vikram's precise handwriting. Meet me at 10 a.m. Driver will take you. Bring comfortable shoes. Curious and slightly nervous, she followed his instructions. The car brought her to an unfamiliar neighborhood in Juhu, quieter than their downtown penthouse closer to the sea. The driver stopped before a two-story house with a garden, modest by Malhotra standards but elegant in its simplicity. Vikram waited on the front steps, looking uncharacteristically casual in a light linen shirt. No tie or jacket in sight. What is this place? Anya asked as she approached. A house, he replied, his attempt at nonchalance betrayed by a tension in his shoulders. Our house, potentially. If you like it. Anya stared at him, processing his words. Our house? But the penthouse is a showcase, a business address. He gestured toward the door. This could be a home. Inside, sunlight spilled through large windows, illuminating spaces that were elegant but welcoming. The living room opened onto a garden where frangipani trees cast dappled shadows. Upstairs, Vikram showed her a master suite, guest rooms, and a space that made Anya catch her breath. A perfect artist's studio with northern light and built-in storage. The previous owner was a painter, Vikram explained, watching her reaction carefully. I thought you might find it suitable. It's perfect, she whispered, running her hand along a windowsill. But Vikram, why? Our arrangement doesn't require a new residence. He took a deep breath as if preparing for a difficult negotiation. Our arrangement has evolved beyond its original parameters. Has it? Anya's heart quickened, but she needed clarity, not implication. In what way? Vikram, accustomed to commanding boardrooms and directing corporations, seemed suddenly uncertain. Perhaps we should sit down. In the sun-filled living room, they faced each other like two people on the verge of a significant discovery. 1 year ago, Vikram began, I proposed a transaction. A marriage of convenience with clear terms and a predetermined end date. He looked down at his hands, then back at Anya with unusual directness. I didn't anticipate how that arrangement would change me. Change you how? Anya prompted gently. Before you, my life was efficient but hollow. I measured success in acquisitions, expansions, profit margins. I didn't recognize what was missing. He gestured to the space around them. This house represents something I've been contemplating for months. A different kind of investment. In real estate? Anya asked, though she understood he meant something more. A small smile touched his lips. In permanence. In the possibility of a real marriage, not just a contracted arrangement. The words hung in the air between them, monumental in their implication. Anya felt her careful emotional defenses begin to waver. Vikram, are you saying? I'm saying I want to tear up our contract, he interrupted, his voice gaining conviction. I want to start again. Not as a business arrangement, but as two people choosing each other, building something genuine. Anya stood, moving to the window to gather her thoughts. The garden beyond reminded her of painted scenes she'd created as a child, imaginary homes where she'd belong someday. This is unexpected, she finally said. How can I be sure this isn't just another transaction? A more comfortable arrangement that still serves your interests? It was a fair question, and Vikram recognized the legitimate doubt behind it. He joined her at the window, carefully maintaining a respectful distance. 6 months ago, the Al-Farsi deal was finalized. Our business relationship has served its contractual purpose. He turned to face her directly. I could have thanked you for your service and begun divorce proceedings as outlined in our agreement. Instead, I found myself looking for reasons to extend our arrangement, to create new projects together, to come home earlier. The admission, its vulnerability and honesty touched Anya deeply, but years of learned caution held her back from immediate acceptance. What exactly are you proposing? A real marriage. Not one with an exit clause or financial incentives, just us, discovering what we could be together. Before Anya could respond, her phone rang, the art center's administrative number. With an apologetic glance at Vikram, she answered. The call brought devastating news. A major grant they'd been counting on had fallen through. Without immediate funding, they would need to close half their programs and let go several teachers. I'll be right there, Anya promised, ending the call with shaking hands. What's happened? Vikram asked, immediately alert to her distress. She explained the situation, already gathering her things. I need to go. We have 50 children enrolled in those programs, Vikram. Children who count on us. I'll come with you, he said without hesitation. At the arts center, they found the staff gathered in worried groups. Children were arriving for afternoon classes, unaware of the crisis threatening their creative haven. Anya moved among them with reassuring smiles that didn't reach her eyes, while Vikram observed the community she had built. The paintings covering the walls, the sculptures displayed on handmade pedestals, the sense of belonging that permeated the space. He thought about Anya's childhood, moving from home to home, never having a permanent place. He thought about the children here, many from challenging backgrounds, finding stability and expression through art. And he thought about himself, how his own sense of home had slowly shifted from properties and possessions to the feeling of Anya's presence. While Anya met with her staff, Vikram stepped outside to make a series of phone calls. When he returned an hour later, his expression was unreadable. Can we speak privately? He asked. In Anya's small office, surrounded by children's artwork and grant applications, Vikram explained what he had done. The Malhotra Foundation will replace the grant funding, effective immediately. Additionally, I've established an endowment that will support the center's operations for the next 20 years, regardless of external funding fluctuations. Anya stared at him in disbelief. 20 years? Vikram, that must be approximately 30 crore rupees, he confirmed. With conservative investment, it should grow sufficiently to maintain programs indefinitely. The sum, millions of dollars, took Anya's breath away. Why would you commit that kind of money? Even for tax purposes, it's excessive. Vikram's expression softened. It's not for tax purposes, Anya, it's for you, and for them. He gestured toward the classrooms where children could be heard laughing. Some investments can't be measured in quarterly returns. Tears filled Anya's eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything now, he replied gently. About the endowment or about my earlier proposal. Take the time you need. That evening, after ensuring the immediate crisis was resolved, they returned to the penthouse in thoughtful silence. At the door to her suite, Anya paused. Would you like to come in for tea? She asked. A small invitation that represented a larger threshold. In her sitting room, more personal than any other space in their shared residence, they sat closer than their usual careful distance. Anya held the delicate teacup between her hands, gathering courage. When I was 15, she began slowly. I lived with a family for almost a year, the Sharmas. They were kind, stable. They began talking about adoption. She set down her cup, the memory still painful. I allowed myself to hope, to imagine permanence. Then Mrs. Sharma became pregnant, and suddenly there wasn't room in their lives for a teenage foster child. Vikram listened intently, understanding the weight of what she was sharing. After that, I protected myself by expecting endings. Every relationship, every situation, I always prepared for its conclusion. She looked up at him directly. Our marriage contract felt safe precisely because it came with an expiration date. No false hopes, no unexpected rejection. And now? Vikram asked quietly. Now I'm terrified, she admitted, because for the first time since I was 15, I've begun to hope for something lasting. And hope is dangerous for people with my history. Vikram set aside his tea and took her hands in his, a gesture that had once been part of their public performance, but now carried genuine tenderness. Anya, when I created that contract, I thought I was being practical, efficient. I didn't realize I was using business to protect myself from the same thing you feared. Genuine connection, with all its uncertainties and vulnerabilities. His grip tightened slightly. I can't promise we won't face difficulties, but I can promise you this. You will never again be temporary to someone. Not to me. The vow, simple but profound, broke something open in Anya's heart. Years of careful self-protection gave way to a truth she had been avoiding for months. She had fallen in love with her husband of convenience. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would like to see that house again." 2 weeks later, they moved into the Juhu house. The contract that had defined their relationship remained in Vikram's office drawer, unsigned amendments in the margins, increasingly irrelevant to the life they were choosing day by day. The transformation wasn't immediate or without challenges. Both carried patterns established over decades. Vikram's tendency to retreat into work under stress, Anya's instinct to prepare for abandonment. But each time old habits emerged, they found themselves better equipped to recognize and address them together. 6 months after moving to Juhu, a different kind of crisis tested their evolving bond. The Al-Farsi family, the original reason for their marriage, became embroiled in a financial scandal. As their closest business partner, Malhotra Industries faced collateral damage. Share prices plummeted. Investors panicked. Competitors circled like vultures. Vikram worked around the clock to contain the fallout. Days passed with him barely coming home, falling back into his old patterns of isolation under pressure. Anya watched with growing concern as he withdrew into the familiar fortress of business problems and solutions. On the 5th night of this crisis, she made a decision. Arriving at his office well after midnight, she found him surrounded by reports and projections. Looking exhausted beyond measure. "You need to come home," she said simply, standing in the doorway. "I can't," he replied without looking up. "The Singapore investors are threatening to pull out. If they do, you'll handle it," Anya interrupted, moving to his desk. "But not tonight. Not alone." Vikram finally looked up, the weariness in his eyes giving way to surprise at her presence. "This isn't your problem, Anya, isn't it?" She perched on the edge of his desk. "I seem to recall some promises about sharing our lives, the good and the difficult." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I didn't expect you to include corporate crises in that arrangement." "Neither did I," she admitted. "But here I am anyway." Something in her steady presence, offering support without demand, reached through Vikram's ingrained solitude. He allowed her to take his hand, to lead him home, to remind him that business empires might rise and fall, but some foundations were built to withstand any storm. The following morning, refreshed and thinking more clearly, Vikram found a solution that had eluded his exhausted mind. Within weeks, Malhotra Industries had not only weathered the crisis but emerged stronger, with more diverse partnerships and a resilience that impressed the business community. "You saved the company," he told Anya one evening as they walked along Juhu Beach, the setting sun painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. She laughed softly. "I didn't solve your financial problems. I just reminded you to rest. You did more than that." He stopped, turning to face her. "You showed me that I don't have to face difficulties alone anymore. That might be the most valuable lesson I've learned in 20 years of business." As they continued their walk, hands linked loosely between them, Anya reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a cold contract signing in a sterile office to this warm companionship on a beach near the home they shared. "Do you ever think about how differently this could have gone?" she asked. "If I had remained just a convenient signature on documents? If you had stayed the businessman who saw marriage as merely a strategic move?" Vikram considered this as they watched the waves caress the shore. "I think we were always more than the roles we agreed to play. We just needed time to recognize it." 1 year and 9 months after their business-like wedding, they stood together in the garden of their Juhu home, surrounded by a small gathering of people who had become meaningful in their shared life. Sudha Malhotra, beaming with approval. Prisha, who had supported Anya through the early days of their arrangement. Rohan, whose loyalty had extended to helping them find their true path. And children from the art center bringing color and laughter to the occasion. This second wedding, private, genuine, chosen, included no contracts, no terms, no strategic advantages. Vikram wore no tie. Anya's sari was embellished with embroidery created by her students. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises that acknowledged both their unusual beginning and their committed future. "I chose you first for all the wrong reasons," Vikram admitted, holding her hands before their witnesses. For your lack of complications, your convenient solitude. I see now that what I thought were practical qualities were actually your deepest wounds. Wounds you had learned to carry with dignity and strength. Anya smiled through tears as he continued. Today, I choose you for entirely different reasons. For your compassion that taught me to see beyond balance sheets. For your courage in opening your heart despite every reason to keep it guarded. For showing me that the richest kind of wealth isn't counted in acquisitions but in moments of genuine connection. When it was Anya's turn, she took a deep breath, centering herself in this moment. She had never expected to experience. I grew up believing that family was something that happened. To other people, a permanent connection. I wasn't meant to have, she began softly. Our marriage began as a transaction, with boundaries and timelines carefully defined. The perfect arrangement for someone who had learned to expect endings. She reached up to touch his face gently. A gesture of intimacy that had evolved naturally between them. What I never expected was that within that careful arrangement, I would find what I'd been searching for my entire life. Not just a name to share or a house to live in, but a true sense of belonging. A home that exists not in contracts or properties, but in the space between your heart and mine. As the simple ceremony concluded and their guests celebrated around them, Vikram and Anya stood slightly apart, taking in the moment. Are you happy? He asked quietly. A question that would have seemed irrelevant in their original arrangement but now held profound importance. Anya looked around at the garden they had planted together, at the home they had created, at the unlikely family they had gathered, some related by blood, others by choice and circumstance. She thought about the journey from orphan child to foster teenager to independent woman to reluctant contract bride to this, a person deeply known and genuinely cherished. Yes, she answered simply, the word containing multitudes. This is what happiness feels like. Later that evening, after their guests had departed, they sat in their garden beneath stars that seemed to mirror the lights of Mumbai in the distance. The contract that had once defined their relationship had been ceremonially torn up during their vows, a symbolic ending to the arrangement that had unexpectedly led them to love. What do you think about children? Vikram asked suddenly, the question emerging from months of private consideration. Anya turned to him, surprised by the timing, but not by the question itself. I'd like to adopt, she said carefully. There are so many children waiting for permanent homes, for the sense of belonging I never had until now. Vikram nodded, reaching for her hand. I was hoping you'd say that. The future stretched before them, no longer constrained by contractual terms or business necessities, but open to possibilities neither had dared imagine when they first sat across from each other in a sterile office, discussing a marriage of convenience. What had begun as the coldest of transactions had transformed into the warmest of truths. That love isn't always found in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but sometimes in the slow, steady discovery of home in another person's presence. That family isn't just something you're born into, but something you can build day by day, choice by choice, from whatever foundations you have. For Vikram Malhotra, who had once measured value only in acquisitions and expansions, and Anya Sharma, who had spent a lifetime preparing for abandonment, this was the richest discovery of all, that the heart, like a well-designed structure, can be renovated and expanded, creating space for the kind of love that needs no contract to endure.